You could please publish. In the Superior Court of Cobb County, State of Georgia, the State of Georgia versus Jerome Cox, Criminal Action 24-9-329-58. Verdict. Count 1. Select only 1. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of homicide by vehicle in the second degree. Count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of failure to exercise due care toward pedestrian. Count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Count 6. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. This 6th day of December 2024, signed by foreperson James Ruley. Anything from the state?
Judge, if we could just inspect it before.
I'll get you copies made. Anything else from the state?
Nothing to say right now, Judge.
Anything from counsel?
Nothing from the defense, Judge.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to need you to step back in the back for just a little bit and await further instructions, please. All right, everyone have a seat. We still have another portion to the trial.
Yes.
Are we prepared to go forward today?
Judge, we have 2 minutes to confirm real quick.
Yes.
Judge, we're going to step outside real quick.
Okay, thank you. I'll step off the bench then, and if you'll just let...
Step back with Mr. Cox.
You may.
Thank you.
Is that the verdict form?
No.
Like she has
the other,
Another copy? Okay.
copy of the verdict.
All right, and you just heard, you just heard the jury bringing down a verdict in the trial of Jerome Cox. He is a man now convicted on some of the charges he was facing in the death of a 17-year-old girl from Kennesaw. I want to get into some of the background in the short break that we have before we're going to take you back out live. Right now, defense attorneys have asked for a 2-minute recess just to discuss with their clients before the later portion of this trial continues. But we just heard really the massive update of this is the jury's verdict, bringing down 2 guilty charges, one for vehicular homicide, second-degree homicide by vehicle, and of course the second being guilty for failure to exercise due care. Now, some of the other charges, 4 of them, Jerome Cox was found not guilty. So it comes down to what the sentencing and really the punishment looks like for the second-degree homicide by vehicle and failure to exercise due care charge. Now, to give you a little bit of background in this trial, we've been taking you gavel to gavel through this process. The jury beginning deliberations yesterday, that led all the way up until late into the night at about 8:30 when Judge Kimberly Childs sent jurors home after they said that they did not reach their decision. They came back today early in the morning, and we just heard moments ago what that deliberation came out to, those 2 guilty verdicts from the jury. Just to give you a little bit of background, this stemming from an incident that we first brought you right here on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus, prosecutors during trial arguing that Jerome Cox was driving home from a Christmas party with open containers of alcohol in his car when he plowed his SUV through a crosswalk along Ben King Road and then fatally striking a 17-year-old Harrison High School student who was crossing that road during that time. That student identified as Olivia Pugh. So facing charges of DUI, facing charges of homicide by vehicle, now being found guilty of those charges. I'm going to play you earlier in court some of the video that we brought you live as we heard from defense attorneys, as we heard from prosecutors making their case, and of course coming down to the jury, and ultimately through review of body camera footage, through the timeline that was laid out in court, and really all the hard-to-hear details that came out of this, statements from family, statements from witnesses and those impacted, it ultimately led to the jury's final decision, 2 guilty verdicts, one really the one that was capturing attention of many was the homicide by vehicle in second degree, as well as a guilty verdict for failure to exercise due care. Of course, typically with these court proceedings, after a verdict is given, we move on to the sentencing, and really that's where all eyes are now, is learning what the judge will rule on for sentencing for these 2 guilty verdicts. But this trial, again, taking you back out live here, currently on a short recess as defense attorneys talk with their client, talk with Jerome Cox about the next steps forward for him and their representation. We do typically also see in these this stage of trials that we hear from the impacted victims, and we hear from the family members of the defendant, in this case, the family members of Jerome Cox. It is up in the air of what that will look like, but we are going to stay on top of this gavel to gavel for you as we wait for this recess. Again, the big news developing here for you, a guilty verdict for homicide by vehicle in the second degree and a guilty verdict for failure to exercise due care. And as we wait for trial to resume, I do want to go through some of the background in this case and the latest of where we are at as far as the next steps and hearing from judge and prosecutors, taking you through essentially what's a bulleted list just to review some of the facts that were presented at trial, some of what you heard, and where we are at now, just bringing this back for you. This all stemming from an incident involving a 17-year-old high school student, that victim identified as Olivia Pugh, and Jerome Cox at the center of it, now found guilty on 2 charges: homicide by vehicle in the 2nd degree and failure to exercise due care. Now, the jury bringing that verdict after hours of deliberation, starting Thursday, going late into the night, as late as 8:30 p.m. when judge let jurors go home, and then resuming earlier today with that verdict coming down just moments ago. Now, Jerome Cox was accused of hitting and killing Olivia Pugh at a marked crosswalk on Ben King Road, that's in Kennesaw, on the night of December 8th, 2023. Pugh, she's a high school student at Harrison High, was walking with a group of other teenagers. They were on their way to see Christmas lights when they entered the crosswalk. And meanwhile, Jerome Cox, as presented by prosecutors and defense attorneys during the course of this trial, you heard, was behind a vehicle, a 2017 GMC. At that moment, as Pugh was crossing the marked crosswalk, prosecutors said he hit her, and that sent her into a wooded area on the side of the road. She was taken to Wellstar Kennestone Hospital in critical condition and unfortunately passed 2 days later. Now, police, during the course of the investigation, arrested and charged Cox because they said he was driving under the influence of alcohol at the time. And I do believe court is back, so let's take you back out live and hear what the judge has to say.
You'll have a seat. Bobby, here's that note that just says the jury has a verdict. What are we marking that as?
I'm sorry?
What did you say we were marking it as?
24.
Okay, that'll be courts 24. All right, Mr. Slifka, is the state ready to proceed? Ms. Buxton?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. After speaking with counsel and speaking with the family, the state is electing to dismiss count 7 of this indictment. We are preparing a null pros for the court's consideration at this time. Given that a verdict has been rendered on counts 1 through 6 of the indictment, I've spoken to defense counsel. We would ask that sentencing be heard today. Mr. Cox has been in custody since December 8th. The maximum possible sentence would be 12 months. That I believe would be Sunday. So if we could move to sentencing today, but with the court's leave, if we could have about 30 minutes for the family to prepare their victim impact statements, have defense counsel prepare before we move to that sentencing phase.
No objection.
All right, so what I'd like to do now is I'm going to bring the jury back, and I'm going to release them. And normally what I do is I tell the jurors how they can communicate with counsel. I don't think the way I normally do that would work today. But if I will let them know that lawyers may want to speak with them at some point in time. Usually we do that kind of here in the courtroom afterwards. Oops, excuse me. Sorry about that. And I don't think that'll work just yet. I'll try to think about it when I take them their checks and stuff while we're on our 30-minute break and see if I can figure out a better way.
I've had, if I could offer,
Sure.
I've had instances in other courtrooms where the jurors are allowed to leave out the back as they usually come in, and defense counsel and counsel for the state will be in the hallway, and if they want to speak to us, they'll stop, and if not, they'll just continue on and exit. That's just a suggestion.
We also have because cards. Can you open your microphone? Yeah, sorry. We also have cards in case they want to reach out to us after they've had an opportunity. If you want to share those with anyone.
I'm happy to give them your cards.
I don't have a lot, but
Yeah.
it's at least our contact information so that.
Sure. Do you guys have some too?
We do, Judge.
Why don't I do that? Why don't I give them that? The other thought was sometimes I let them go down the jury assembly room, and you guys can go down there and talk with them.
That'd be fine.
I'll figure out how I want to do that. you want to go ahead and give me your cards? Yeah, just if you can give them to me, because I'm going to bring them in here, and then you only have one. Okay. Well, they'll have their phones back. So
There you go.
all right, thank you. All right, if you could bring the jury in, please, including the alternate.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a seat. Thank you, members of the jury, for your service. You have concluded your service on the jury. You are no longer subject to those instructions I have given to you about not talking to people about this case, all of the instructions about posting things, talking to people. You're not subject to that anymore. You are free to talk to anyone you like about the case and the decision your jury has reached. By the same token, you are not required to speak to anyone about the case. Sometimes jurors may be contacted about their deliberations well after the case has been decided. You are free to refuse to speak to anyone about the case. That is your decision. Should anyone make contact with you who causes you any concern, or should anyone try to speak to you after you have declined to speak with them, you should feel free to contact the sheriff's office or my office in that regard. You will now return to the jury room for your paperwork, and then you will be officially released from service. Thank you. Madam Bailiff?
Yes.
If you could go ahead and bring the evidence back to the clerk as well. All right, we'll be in recess for about 30 minutes.
And Judge, do you know if you're taking down to the jury assembly room?
Which do y'all prefer?
I'll defer to the court.
I'll see someone let you back.
Well, I think I'll let y'all come back. I think that's what I'll do.
Your Honor, I think there's a party.